Good morning, everyone. So we're happy to see everybody, and we'll start without ado. So song service will be by Mr. Bramham. Are you helping out with that? No? Yeah, he is, and Miss Howell. So you guys can go for it. We're ready.
Good morning, church. Okay, let's turn our hymnals to hymn number 202, Hail Him, the King of Glory.
Tell it to every kindred and nation, tell it far and near. Earth's darkest night will fade with the dawning, Jesus will soon appear. Hail him, the King of glory, was the Lamb of sinners slain. Tell the wondrous story, Jesus comes to reign. Nations again in strife and commotion, warnings by the way. Signs in the heavens, unerring omens, herald the glorious day. Hail him, the King of glory, once the Lamb for sinners slain. Tell the wondrous story, Jesus comes to reign. Children of God, look up with rejoicing, shout and sing his praise. Blessed are they who, waiting and watching, look for the dawning rays. Hail him, the King of glory, was the Lamb for sinners slain. Tell the wondrous story, Jesus comes to reign.
Let's turn our hymnals now to hymn number 567, Have Thine Own Way, Lord.
Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own surely is thine. Touch me and heal me, Savior divine. Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Hold o'er my being, absolute sway. Fill with thy spirit, till all shall sing. Christ only always living in me.
Thank you, Song Service crew. I always appreciate the music. Now, it's time for our lesson study. So we're going to ask the Lord to be with us as we study. And then I'm not going to sit up here. I know it's set up for somebody to stand up here and just expostulate and wear your ears out, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be asking for your help as well, because let me ask this question. How many of you studied the Sabbath school lesson? Raise your hands high. Okay. 2 people. All right. That's not so good. So what we have to do is we're going to have to read before we even begin. So is that able to be rolling? Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's ask the Lord to be with us, and we're ready to begin. Dear Jesus, we want to thank you so much for your word, and we want to thank you for the examples that were laid forth in there, no matter how embarrassing it might have been, how dysfunctional the families were, but it's there for us because we're just as dysfunctional. And I want to thank you and ask you to be with us as we help get rid of some of these things that crop up in our lives and make it difficult for us. So thank you so much again for the lesson. Please send your Holy Spirit to guide our minds. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so I hope all of you have access to a Bible. How many of you have a Bible that you can use? 1, 2, 3. All right, good. 4, 5. All right, as long as you got your phone, you've got something you can work with. That's what we need. Please turn to Genesis 41. Genesis 41. And since only 2 of us studied, we're going to have to figure out what we're talking about here. Yes, the title says Joseph in Power, I think, something like that. Let me look at it so I can get it directly right. Joseph, Prince of Egypt, that's what it says. It even has a memory verse there, Genesis 41:41. But what we're going to do is just kind of go through what might have happened here, all right, or what did happen. So Pharaoh had dreams, and he had 2 dreams that he could not make any sense of. They were terrifying to him because they were so odd. Okay? Whoever heard of skinny cows eating fat cows? And whoever heard of fat pieces of corn or ears of corn eating skinny ears of corn? Nobody hears of that. And it was repeated with the 7 cows, 7 ears of corn. So with that being stressed, he woke up out of the night and called his wise men in and said to them, "What does this mean?" It was repeated twice, yes, in different ways, but it was repeated twice, which means it probably is going to come true. Well, none of them could come up with anything, and they shook and rattled and threw things on the floor and tried to divine what was happening, and they couldn't. They couldn't figure it out. So Pharaoh's in a rage. He's got his whole household up. Everybody's running around because the Pharaoh is not happy. And in the confusion of it all, lo and behold, his butler, who was supposed to remember 2 or 3 years ago about a dream being told, his own dream being interpreted for him, and it came true. Within 3 days, he was reinstated. Within 3 days, his roommate, the winemaker, died, was killed, was executed. And he was going to tell Pharaoh about this man who was in prison who could tell these dreams. But in the process of time and being so happy to be out of jail, he forgot. But with Pharaoh making such a rage, it all of a sudden popped back into his head. Oh, I do know somebody who could help you, Pharaoh. I do know someone who could tell what you dreamed. And the Pharaoh is so desperate at this point that he says to the winemaker, who is it? He says, well, there's this Hiburu, or there's this, shepherd. There's this jailer who rose to the top because he's so meticulous in how he runs everything and how he takes care of all of us. He doesn't embezzle our food when it comes in. He gives it to all the jailers, and he treats us really well. There's this jailer that was made the head of the jail, and he could help you. So Pharaoh's so desperate, he says, go get this jailer. So they run off to the prison, and Joseph's doing his regular job, going about his business. All of a sudden, they rush in and tell him he's got to go and see the Pharaoh. And his hair has grown long, and he's clean, but he's raggedy looking. They drag him in there, shave him, cut his hair, put some decent clothes on him that's presentable for the Pharaoh, and they send him in. So let's take it from there. Let's go to 41. Is it 41 that I'm supposed to be in? Yes. Let's go to 41, and let's take it at 41, number 26, or 28. 41, 28. Joseph tells him, he says, the Pharaoh tells him his dreams. Let's go back to 25. Then Joseph says, both dreams have the same meaning. The God of heaven is letting your majesty, Pharaoh of Egypt, know what is about to happen. The 7 well-fed cows and the 7 fat ears of corn represent a 7-year period. And the 7 skinny cows and the 7 thin ears of corn blasted by the desert winds also represent a 7-year period. Now I'm at 28. It is the God of heaven. Notice Joseph doesn't take any credit for what he's about to give. None. He keeps saying the God of heaven. Who is it? I can't hear you. The God of heaven. He's the one that's giving this interpretation, even though Joseph is a mediator, okay? Or he's a medium. So it is the God of heaven who is showing Pharaoh what he is about to happen to Egypt. First, there will be 7 years of plenty throughout the land. After that, there will be 7 years of famine, so severe that the 7 good years will be hard to remember. The whole country will feel the effects. And the famine will be so severe that whatever the good years produce will be used up during the bad years. And the dream was given twice to show that this will happen and begin very soon. I'm at verse 33. My suggestion, now notice Joseph doesn't just tell him what the dreams mean. This young man is very, he solves problems, and he solves them all the time. He solved them in Potiphar's house. They used to depend on the floods to be able to water their crops. Joseph said, no, 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 no. I know you all believe in Ra, and which is the sun god. I know you all believe in the frog god, and I know you have all these other gods that you believe in, but he says there is a God of heaven, the only true God that blesses man. And he says, and with that in mind, he says, there is a way that we can have water all the time. He says, let's do some irrigation. So he set up irrigation all through Pharaoh's land. He said, there's a way to take care of these cows better than the way you've been doing. He fixed up a way for the cows. They were throwing away dough in the kitchen. He says, no, wait a minute, let's give that to the cows. It'll fatten the cows up. Let's not waste any food. By the time he got through with Pharaoh's farmland, Pharaoh said, well, come in, let me see what you can do. This young man could already read Canaanite, and it came in handy when he went out into the marketplace, because he could deal with all those nomads that came in because he knew their language. He could also write so they couldn't cheat him. All right, so this young man had been solving problems all along. And when the jail, he solved problems there. So he doesn't just stop with telling the interpretation of the dream. He goes on and says, I also know. He said, this is my suggestion. And he says, I'm on verse 33, my suggestion is for your majesty to put someone in charge of planning for the future. Assign officers to help him, and together they should see to it that 1/5 of all the food grown in Egypt during the 7 good years is stored and saved. They should be faithful in doing this. These officers should see to it that storage facilities are built near every major city. Now notice that most of the major cities, I don't know if any of you have been to Egypt, but when you go to Egypt, you will notice that all the major cities are by the Nile, okay? That's the life source, that's the water source. So when they built these granaries, they had to also engineer how they were going to get it up high enough so that the Nile, when it did flood, would not get into that grain and rot it. So all of that had to be engineered, and all the major cities, he had granaries built. That's when he was made the ruler. But he says you need to, the officers should see that storage facilities are built near every major city, and then transport all surplus food there is to be stored. Let the food belong to Pharaoh. Now, the stored food should be saved for the 7 years of famine and should in no way be touched during the 7 good years, because the future of Egypt will depend on it. Now, we're at 37. 41, number 37. Pharaoh believed that Joseph's interpretation of the dream was true, and it seemed to the king, as it did to all of the king's counselors, that Joseph's suggestions as to how to prepare for the famine were sound. We think we have it bad when we get taxed. 1/5 is quite a bit. Okay, 1/5 is quite a bit, but they had so much coming in that they didn't feel it, all right? What are our taxes, about 1/10? How much do you guys pay for taxes on your income? How many of you guys do the business at your house? About 30%, you think? Okay, 30%. Is 30% 1/5? I'm not sure. 1/3.
1/5 is 20%.
Okay. So this was 1/5. That's quite a bit, all right, compared to us. But anyway, they had so much coming in that it didn't bother them. Then Pharaoh said to his counselors, I'm on verse 38. Then Pharaoh said to his counselors, where can we find a man like this, through whom the spirit of the gods of heaven works? We should put him in charge of this project, don't you think? 39, turning to Joseph, he said, since the supreme God has given you this insight into the future and the wisdom to interpret dreams, I'm putting you in charge of everything. Whatever you tell the people to do, they are to do, beginning right here in the palace. Only in the matters of government and royal concern will I be greater than you. Yes, I'm putting you in charge of the entire country of Egypt. How many people do you know that has come from jail and been put into a position like that? I know one. and I can't remember, is from South Africa. What was his name? He left jail and then became a government official. Mandela. Mandela did that, okay? But there are not too many other people that just leave a prison position and then go to being in the government or being in that high up position. Yes, I'm putting you in charge of the entire country of Egypt. So anyway, moving on down here, I'm on 43. Pharaoh ordered a chariot for Joseph, and they rode through the streets. Oh, first of all, they had to get him dressed even more, because even coming out of prison, he was still raggedy looking. So the Pharaoh took off his royal ring, and this is in 42, and he put his royal ring on Joseph's finger. He ordered Joseph to dress in the finest linens of Egypt's elite, and to wear the gold chain of government around the neck. These things are so ornate. If you go into the Pharaoh's museum in Egypt, it's incredible, the jewels that are in it, and it's pretty big. Fits all the way around the neck, and they have a lot of them there, and you can check them out. But anyway, Pharaoh ordered a chariot for Joseph, and they rode through the streets of the city. Joseph, as second in command, rode his chariot just behind Pharaoh's, and men walked ahead of them shouting, "Kneel before the king and his governor, the one who has been appointed the governor of all Egypt." After the procession, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now remember, I'm still the king of Egypt, and I'm the one who appointed you as governor and gives you authority over all the land of Egypt. No one will dare to lift up his hand against you anywhere in our country." Then Pharaoh changed Joseph's name to, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but Zaphenath Paneah, which means God speaks and the land lives. And he gave him Asenath. Asenath was the daughter of the high priest. And I'm sure she had been being groomed for years to be married to a high official. And this just happened to be the opportunity and one of the highest officials that she could be given to. Joseph loved her dearly. Okay. How do we know that? We'll read about it in a minute. Okay. So he gave him the daughter of Potipharah, the high priest of Heliopolis, to be his wife. And he told him again that as governor, he was now officially in charge of all the land of Egypt. As you study the Egyptian, the history of it, the nomads, they called them, there were different sections of Israel. Sorry, let me get back into Egypt. Different sections of Egypt with guys that were heads of certain section of it. So Egypt was really dispersed, or they didn't really get along that well. And so Pharaoh dearly wanted to get in control of these men, but he couldn't, because they were pretty self-sufficient. They had their own farms, they had their own, everything they wanted, they had it. And he really didn't have good control of the country like he would have liked to. So as the famine continued, pretty soon, when the famine hit, some of these gnomes did put food away. Some of them didn't, because they didn't believe the famine was going to come. What happened, though, is that when the famine hit, everybody in 2 years' time had to come to the Pharaoh or to Cairo or to Joseph and buy what they needed. So first they had money. Next, they didn't have money, so they had to sell all their cattle. After they sold all their cattle, they had to sell themselves. And the king couldn't believe he was totally in charge of Egypt at that point. But it didn't happen until that famine hit, and everybody kept diminishing their resources until finally it was them. And Pharaoh was in charge of the land. He was in charge of the people, everything they had. And that, again, his household, Pharaoh's household, was completely on top, completely in control. Joseph and his God, God of heaven, did that for Pharaoh. Moving on. How old was Joseph? 46. He was 30 years old. That's a good age. That's a wonderful age. That's when you're in your prime as a man. Okay, he was 30 years old when Pharaoh made him governor, and he bowed to Pharaoh as he left his presence to take charge of the land of Egypt. During the 7 good years, the land produced abundantly. Joseph collected 1/5 of all the crops in Egypt and stored them near the major cities in each district. That's what they are, districts. They call them nomes sometimes too, though. Soon there was so much grain that Joseph decided to stop measuring it. Because, at first he came in, he was like 1 sack, 2 sacks, 3 sacks. He was counting every little grain. Pretty soon it came in so fast, there was such an abundance that the piles of grain looked like huge mounds of sand from the seashore. Isn't that amazing? During these years, Joseph's wife, the one that he loved, bore him 2 sons. Joseph named the firstborn, what did he name him? Manasseh. For he said, God has made me forget all my sufferings, including what happened to me in my father's house. She was making him truly happy. He was so happy with his wife. And he named the second son Ephraim. For he said, God has given me a lovely family in a land away from home. And I know he was probably asking Pharaoh, can I go see my father? Is there any way I can go see? Can I go home now? And Pharaoh would say, no, you can't leave, not yet. We're still going to have those bad years. You can't go home, not yet. And so he was never able to go home. Finally, the 7 years of plenty ended. This is 53. And the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. Not only was Egypt affected, but also all the countries bordering Egypt. Okay, so you have the Sahara Desert that's right next to Egypt. You have, coming out of there, you have Jordan. You have Israel. It went way up, that famine, and everybody was affected. No crops were harvested anywhere. And when the local people went to Pharaoh and begged for food, he said, go see Joseph. Whatever he tells you to do, do it. The famine worsened. This is in 56, and soon the entire area of the world suffered. So Joseph opened all the storage facilities, and he sold Pharaoh's grain to the people as they needed it. The famine didn't end the first year, nor the second year, but continued as Joseph had said it would. And soon the people from other countries came to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was everywhere. All right, now where his brothers appear. And this is up in Israel. Okay, and when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, I'm on chapter 42 here. When he heard that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, you need to stop talking about how awful this famine is and do something about it. I hear that Egypt has stored up a lot of food and is now selling it. Go there and buy some so we can eat and live. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to Egypt to buy what food they could. But Jacob kept Benjamin. He kept Benjamin. And you can imagine it's been, what now? Joseph's 30. Well, that was 30 when he began. 7 years. He's 37 years old now. He was 17 when he came to Potiphar's house. So that's how many years? I can't do math. What's 37 take away 17? How many? 20 years. Okay, it's been 20 years since he's seen his brothers. Okay. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to Egypt to buy what food they could, but Jacob kept Benjamin. And it's been 20 years that he has believed that Joseph has been dead. This father, this Jacob. And this child, Benjamin, of his favorite wife, he's been tricked, but this favorite wife of his he only has one child left. And he's like, no, you can't take him. He was, let me get back and read this here. But Joseph kept Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, at home because he was afraid something might happen to him. Chapter 42, verse 5. The other sons of Jacob headed for Egypt to buy food as their neighbors were doing because the famine had affected the whole country of Canaan. Joseph, who was governor of Egypt, was in charge of all the food supply and was selling grain to the people who came in to purchase it. All foreigners had to see him personally to get permission to buy food. His brothers came and bowed before him just as all the others did. How do we know they were going to bow? How do we know they were going to bow? He had a dream. This was his dream. He's looking out there and his brothers, all booties up, bent over, noses on the ground. And it was like, I dreamed this. Over 20 years ago, I dreamed this. And there they are. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted as if he didn't. He spoke roughly to them through an interpreter, saying, "Where do you men come from?" And they answered, "Well, we're from Canaan and have come to buy food." And even though Joseph knew who they were, they didn't recognize him. How could they? His head was shaved. He had a wig that he wore, or maybe he had hair under there, but he had the Egyptian wig. He had his eyes with the liner on the eyes. He had a linen, the finest linen of Egypt on. There was no way that they would know who he was, except maybe if he had blue eyes or something like that and they got close enough to see it. But they did not recognize him at all. He remembered the dreams he had years ago and what had happened when he had told his brothers. They had probably whacked him up good for giving that dream. He wanted to see if their cruel attitude had changed, so he spoke sharply again. "You men are spies and have come here to find the weak spots in our defenses." No, sir, they insisted. "We are humble people and are here to buy food for our families. We are all brothers, Your Excellency. We are honest men, not spies." Joseph shot back, "No, you have come here to find any weak spots in our defenses." And they answered, "Sir, we are 12 brothers." They messed up. They messed up right there, but they said, "We are 12 brothers, sons of the same father who lives in Canaan. One of our brothers is dead, and the youngest is at home." They told everything on themselves right there. Joseph answered, "How do I know you're telling the truth? I still think you're spies, but I will test your honesty. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you had better pass the test. You will not leave until your youngest brother comes here so I can know you're telling me the truth. One of you can go home and get him, and the rest of you will stay here under guard. And if he doesn't come, it will prove that you are spies. I'll give you a couple of days to think about it." And with this statement, he ordered them locked up. After 3 days, and this gave him time to think too, because Joseph was a little rash maybe in saying that, only one of them could go back and get Benjamin. After 3 days, Joseph had them brought in and said, "Since I am a God-fearing man, I've changed my mind." Asenath was probably working on him too. "If you are really honest men, one of you can stay here, and the rest of you are free to buy food that you need and return to your families. But you must come back with your younger brother, or the one who stays here will be executed as a spy, because it will prove to me that you were lying to me. Now you decide among yourselves which one of you will stay here." Verse 21. They said to each other, "The reason this is happening is because we're guilty of killing our brother." They don't know that Joseph hears everything they say and knows exactly what they're thinking. "When we sold him to the Ishmaelites, we saw him desperately. He begged us not to sell him into slavery, but we wouldn't listen. And then Reuben, the oldest, said, 'Didn't I tell you not to sin against your own brother? But you were so stubborn and wouldn't listen. Now the Lord is requiring the blood for blood.' The brothers didn't know that the governor was Joseph, that he could understand everything they were saying because he had used a translator. And then Joseph excused himself and went to his office, where he wept. He just had a meltdown. Later he came back, self-composed, as if nothing had happened. And then he interrupted the brothers and picked Simon. That was taking them too long, because they were over there discussing everything. And he just cut it to the quick and said Simeon. Simeon, the second oldest to remain. So he called him. He ordered the hands tied right there in front of his brothers, and Simeon was taken off to prison between two guards. Why was it Simeon? Come on, you guys. I know you've studied this. Why was it Simeon? What had Simeon done? Yes. Where's the mic? Why did he pick Simeon?
I think it was Simeon's, he was the one who wanted to kill Joseph
Yeah.
and then eventually sell him as a slave. So
What else had Simeon done? Mrs. DeHoonan has her hand up. What else had Simeon done? Simeon was a real scoundrel. He did several things.
When Joseph arrived to looking for his brother to bring him some food, it was Simeon and Levi who tried to get him and say, "Let's kill him." And but Reuben wanted to save his brother Benjamin, so he said, "Just put him in a cave." So because he was thinking of saving him after his brother would be gone, and then but Judah also he was the one who didn't want to kill his brother.
Okay.
He said it's a sin to kill your own brother, so he didn't want to feel guilty. So he's the one who tried to sell, Benjamin to the Ishmaelites. So,
Joseph, yeah.
It's Simeon, really. That's why.
Okay.
He was the one put in
Now,
prison.
come on, you guys. You got to go further back than that. Simeon was the one, he and Levi, they must have gotten a lot of trouble together because Simeon was the one, their little sister. Remember Diana? You remember how Diana went into the city because she didn't have any girlfriends, got in the city and got in trouble, and then ended up at the prince's house, and he forced her. And then after that, he loved her, so he treated her good. And they went to Jacob and said, "My son," the king said, he said to his father, go get Diana for me." And he went in there and said, "I want Diana for a wife." And Jacob waited to talk to the brothers. And the brothers said, "Only if they're all circumcised." And he wanted her so bad that he had the whole city of men circumcised. And after that, he and Levi went in and killed all the men and took the women and made slaves out of them. And Jacob said, "You have made my name to stink. Now, everybody in the country is going to want to kill us. Everyone, because of what you've done." But it was Simeon and Levi, again, who had done that. They were cruel. They were very cruel brothers. These were, I do believe, Leah's children. Okay? So, he was aware of all of that. Joseph had watched that all happen. He said, "Take Simeon." Simeon had done enough stuff so that Simeon needed to stay in jail. So he took Simeon. Okay, so that's the background on Simeon. Where was I? Okay, I'm on verse 25. 45. The brothers return home. Joseph sent a message to the granary manager asking him to fill the brothers' sacks with grain and to give them extra food for along the way. He was also to return their money. So the brothers loaded the sacks of grain on their donkeys and left for home. At the place where they spent the first night, one of them opened his sack to give some grain to his donkey. And there, right on top, was his money. "Look," he shouted, "my money is back in my sack." And they all came running. And when they saw the money, their hearts sank. They were too scared to look in their own sacks. They said to each other, "Now what are we going to do? What else will God let happen to us? Let's hurry home." And when they got back to Canaan, they told Jacob everything that had happened to them. They said, "The man in charge of Egypt was very hard on us. He thought we were spies and wasn't kind to us at all. And we told him we weren't spies, but honest men from Canaan there to buy food. We also told him that we were 12 brothers, all of the same father, and that one of our brothers was dead and that the youngest one was at home. But the governor didn't believe us and still accused us of being spies. He said, 'Okay, I'll test you to see if you're telling the truth. I'll keep one of you in prison, and the rest of you can buy grain for your families and go back home. But all of you need to come back But all of you need to come back and bring your youngest brother with you. Then I'll know that you're honest men telling the truth, because you're willing to risk your lives by coming back here just to save Simeon, who's in prison, your brother. If you bring your other brother, then I'll set this brother free, and you can trade in Egypt all you want." Then the other brothers emptied their sacks, and each man found his money in his sack of grain. When they and their father saw that the money had been returned, they were very fearful. In distress, Jacob cried out, "Do I have to lose another of my sons? Joseph is dead, Simeon is in prison, and now you want to take Benjamin back to Egypt. I'm not sure I can take it." Then Reuben said, "I promise on the lives of my own two sons that when we return to Egypt with Benjamin, we will bring him back with us. Trust me with Benjamin, and I will bring him back." Did he trust Reuben? Did he trust Reuben? Come on, somebody. Did he trust Reuben? Did he? Let's read a little bit more, and then we're going to talk about Reuben. Jacob said, "Benjamin will not go to Egypt with you. Joseph, his brother, is dead, and Benjamin is Rachel's only son left. And if something should happen to him along the way, I couldn't take it at my age. I would die." We're on chapter 43. The famine didn't end, but got worse. And when Jacob's family had used up all the grain which his sons had bought from Egypt, he called them together and said, "You need to go back to Egypt and buy more food for us." And then Judah said, "Father, remember last time when we were in Egypt, how the governor told us not to come back without our youngest brother whom he wants to see face to face? Now, if you're willing for us to take Benjamin with us, we can go and buy some more food. But if you're not willing for us to take Benjamin with us, we can't go back, because the governor told us that we had better not come to see him again unless we bring our youngest brother with us." Then Jacob asked, Why did you put me in such a predicament by telling the governor that you had a younger brother?" They answered, "Because he asked us straight out about our family, whether our father was still alive, and whether we had a younger brother, and how he was doing, and so on. So we simply answered the questions. How could we know that he would ask us to bring our youngest brother with us the next time that we came?" And then Judah said to his father, notice who's talking to him now. It's not Reuben. Who is it? It's Judah. Judah said to his father, "Let us take Benjamin along, because we need to get going. The days are passing and we need more grain. Otherwise we'll all die, especially you, Father, and our little ones. I promise to protect Benjamin and give you my word that if I don't bring him back to you, you can extract whatever you want from my own family." If we hadn't hesitated so long these last few weeks, we could have already been there and back. Then Israel said, "If it has to be that way, take some of the best that we've been able to grow as a personal present from me to the governor. Also take a little balm and honey, spice, and pistachio nuts. I'm telling you, those pistachio nuts are the finest nuts in Jordan, in Israel, and in Egypt. They don't hold a candle to the kind of pistachios that we get here in the United States. Those pistachios are really, really good." Anyway, and he said, "And almonds." And I saw an almond tree there too while I was in Israel. "Double the money with you, the money you found in your sacks, which may have been an oversight, the part of the servants, and additional money for more grain. And take Benjamin with you and get going. We are running out of time, and I'm praying that God will make the governor show mercy to all of you and release Simeon so he can return with you." Now I'm going to ask you that question again. Why didn't he trust Reuben? It was Judah. It was Judah who made says, "I will take your brother and take care of him." Why didn't he trust Reuben? What had Reuben done? Raise your hand high so we can all hear. What had Reuben done that made the father not trust him?
I'm not positive, but did he go in bed with his concubine?
He went and bred with Rachel's servant.
Servant, yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought.
And he had severely disappointed Jacob. Jacob didn't really do anything to discipline him. But when it came down to trust, it was not Reuben who he was going to trust.
Right.
And the trust came with Judah. Notice, what family does Jesus come through? Does he come through the line of Reuben? Reuben's the oldest. It comes through the line of Judah. Judah was the one who was trustworthy. All right, and Jesus came through that line. All right, so then what happens? They get down to Egypt, and the steward did as he was told, took the 10 brothers to, they come in, and when Joseph saw Benjamin, he said to his stewards, "Tell my servants to kill a young animal and prepare for an additional 11 guests, because these men will be having lunch with me today." You know, Joseph is so excited he can hardly take it. He says, "They're having lunch with me." But the men, his brothers, are scared to death. The steward did as he was told and took the 10 brothers to Joseph's house. Now, because they were being taken to the governor's palace, they were afraid and said to each other, "It's because we didn't pay for our first load of grain that we're being taken to the governor's house. And when we get there, he'll have us arrested as thieves, and they'll take all we have and make us his personal slaves." They were freaking out. They were really upset. They were not sure. And when they got to the door of the palace, they said to Joseph's assistants, "Pardon us, sir. We came to Egypt once before to buy grain, and on our way back home, when we got ready to camp, we opened one man's sack of grain and found his money. Later, we all found our money in our sacks. So now we have bought the money back with us to pay for our first load of grain. We also bought more money to pay for a new load of grain, and we still have no idea how each man's money got back into his sack." Then the steward says, "Relax and don't worry. Nothing will happen to you. Maybe God put your money back into your sacks. All I know is that your first haul of grain was paid for." Then they took them into the house, and Simeon was waiting for them. Once inside, the men were given water to wash their hands and feet, and while the servants watered and fed their donkeys outside, and the brothers got their presents ready to give to Joseph when he would arrive to have lunch with them. And when Joseph got home, they took their gifts into the reception room and politely bowed to him. There it is, the second time, his dreams coming true. They bowed to him, and he asked about their families. "How's your father? The old man you told me about. Is he still well?" And he's still talking through an interpreter, so they have no clue that he understands everything that they're saying. And they answered, "Yes, our father is still alive and well." And he answered, and he asked us to tell you that he is your servant to do your bidding. And that's that second dream where the father and the mother bow as well, okay? Then they knelt in front of Joseph and bowed to the ground. When they got up, Joseph saw Benjamin and said, "So, this is the young brother you told me about. Now I can see that you are not spies, but that you have told me the truth. You will be treated as honest men, and I will allow you to come and go and buy food." And then he turned to Benjamin and said, "God bless you, and may he be gracious to you, my son." Suddenly, Joseph excused himself. He couldn't take any more. This is his second meltdown. And he left the room because he couldn't hold back the tears any longer, especially after seeing his younger brother. And I imagine, I can in my mind see what's his wife's name? Oh, shoot, now it slipped my brain. Asenath. I can see her back there trying to get him cleaned back up, washing his face and help getting that coal back on his face and saying, "I can't get anything done today because I have to keep putting you back together so you can get back out there and work with those men." And I can see her trying to get him all patted up and back in composure. So then he washed his face and came back under control and ordered lunch to be served. Now Joseph sat at one table. Egyptians never eat with foreigners. Even our Does that mean whose is that? Oh, somebody else's. Even when we were there, our bus driver never ate with us. He always ate at a table by himself with other Egyptians. We tried to get him to come and eat with us, but he would always say no. Egyptians don't eat with foreigners, okay? And this is still true, a lot true. Joseph sat at one table, his brothers at another, and the Egyptian officials at still another table. It was a curse for the Egyptians to eat with certain foreigners, including the Hebrews. The brothers were seated facing Joseph according to age, from the oldest to the youngest. Again, they're thinking, When the brothers noticed this, they were amazed that the governor knew how to seat them. And then they were served from the food on Joseph's table. Benjamin was offered 5 times as much as his brother, but not one of the brothers showed any jealousy. They all ate and drank happily together. And I'm running out of time. You guys, you need to study your lesson. Look how fascinating this lesson was. How many of you like this lesson? Some of you don't care about it? No? It's a fascinating lesson. Joseph's silver cup was put into Benjamin's sack. I'm going to summarize the rest of it. And when they left, they were all happy because they had everything together and they knew they were going back home. They still did not know it was Joseph. And when they got home, they didn't get home. They got about a day's journey away again. And Joseph sent his servant. His servant went and opened up the sacks and said, somebody has Joseph's cup. Now, each of the governors or all the important people have their own cup, and that cup is tasted from, like that wine person that took care of Potiphar. They always taste it before they give it to the official, and his cup was gone. And so they found it in Benjamin's sack, and the brothers swore that whoever it was, they could kill him. But he says, I'm not going to be that drastic, but whoever has it will be the servant forever. And Judah went to bat for Joseph. He said, if that is my brother, I promised my father I wouldn't take that brother down here and leave him. I cannot leave him. I will stay and be the servant. And at that point in time, Joseph was convinced that they had all changed, okay? God forbid that I should punish all of you, but just the man who has the cup. But no, Judah intercedes for Benjamin, for young Benjamin. I'm at chapter 44, 33. Please let me be your servant and let the young man go back with his brothers. How can I go back to our father without him? I've told you, sir. What I've told you, sir, is true. Then Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. He tells them all to leave the room, all the servants to leave the room, and it's just he and his brothers in there. And Joseph cries so loud that the whole house hears him this time. His servants run and tell Pharaoh what's going on, and he finally says, I am Joseph. I am the one you sold into Egypt. Do not be afraid. God planned this, that I should be sold ahead of time so that I would be here in this position to save you. What started out to be a nightmare, God still turned it around and used it as a huge blessing for those in Israel. And they became so many that when they left, 400 or more of them, okay? So God preserved them. Jacob could not believe his son was still alive. He said, let's hurry and go down to get to Joseph. The brothers had to confess what they had done again. These brothers were some rogues. And when Jacob looked out and saw the wagons, all the stuff that Joseph had sent to bring his family down, he said, let me go down and see my son before I die. He lived another 15 years beyond that. He was able to see his grandchildren. He was also able to bless them. Okay, so that's our lesson for today. Next week's lesson is, and then we have to get a new quarterly, Israel and Egypt. So please study your lesson, okay? It's absolutely fascinating. Yes? Hold on.
What I like about this lesson is about repentance and forgiveness. You know how the brothers were really bad, but they repented and they really changed. And they forgave Joseph's part, that he forgave his brothers. He didn't have the hatred, but he said that God put him there to save them. And with Judah is also a type of Christ, that he was willing to take the place of Benjamin to die for him because he loves us. So Jesus is the same way, that Jesus took our place, died on the cross for our sins. So this lesson was really so beautiful to me. It seems like it makes me cry to see, read this story.
Do you think that Joseph would have forgiven him if he hadn't been so prominent? Do you think that forgiveness would have still been there? Let's say he never became, let's say he never rose to be the second in command of the whole country. Let's say he just had a menial life and they ended up coming down there. Do you think he would have forgiven him the same way? And what makes you think that he would?
Well, I think that when Joseph was testing his brothers with his younger brother Benjamin, and saying that they weren't going to do to him what they did to Joseph, that's what convinced him that they've changed, and that's why he forgave them, because they weren't the same as they were before. And for us today, whatever we've done, we still have a chance for forgiveness, like Wilma was saying.
There's a hand over here. Was it you? No? Okay.
Well, personally, I think that he became close to God. So no matter what happened in his life, he probably had a Christ-like character, and he probably would have forgiven us. Because what we learn in the Bible is that God wants us to forgive other people. And the best reason is for ourselves. If we don't forgive other people, it hurts us. So I think that he probably would have forgiven him because of his closeness to God and the Spirit of God in him.
When you're unforgiven for something, that can take you down to your grave. And it's just like unforgiveness weighs on human beings. And through Jesus, we are released. And that's why we feel so much better when we are forgiven. Yes.
Well, one of the most important things is God's plan in his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he made that complicated. It's a complicated plan, but he took care of his people. Look at it, you read that whole story, it's complicated, but he did it.
Yes. So in Israel, Machpelah's cave, I was there. You can see where Abraham is and where Isaac is. You can enter it from two sides because the fighting is still very intense there between the Muslims and the Israelites. But on the Israelite side, you go up and you can see the caskets from one side. If you go on the other side, you get checked and go through checkpoints, but you can go up in the Muslim side. They have everything carpeted, but you can see those same caskets from the other side of those caves. But go ahead.
I agree with Vincent. I think even though he would have had a menial job, I think he would have still forgiven his brothers.
Yes.
Because he himself had a good heart.
Yes. And does that come overnight?
No.
No. So he'd been working on that in Potiphar's house. He'd been working on that in the jail. And when he became the Pharaoh also. Go ahead.
About Joseph, many are called, but few are chosen. And God happened to use a young man of 17 years old at the time when he was sold into slavery. And he has used other young men. David, for instance, was the youngest of Jesse's sons. Joseph was next to the youngest of Jacob's sons. And he uses young people over and over again, teenagers. Daniel had the gift of interpretation like Joseph had. And God is anxious to use young people. And I was amazed by this. And also the fact that all the brothers were shepherds, and Joseph helped to lead them to the good shepherd. He was a type of Jesus that led them, his brothers, back to the fold.
And when they came to Egypt, Joseph took them to the land of Goshen, the best land for their cattle, and God protected them again. We got to go because there is a planned sermon here, unless we want to just be the sermon, but I don't have that prerogative. So anyway, let's bow our heads. And I want to thank you all for being here today. Would you all please study your Sabbath school lesson? Nothing like studying the Bible. It's the best. Please bow your heads. Dear Jesus, we want to thank you so much for the words that you have of forgiveness for us, and help us as we do the things that you put before us to the best of our abilities, as Joseph did, so that when the time comes and you have something for us especially to do, we'll be prepared, we'll be ready, and our characters will be right because we have started every day making our character, not making our character, but giving ourselves to you so you can make us the best that we can be. We praise you. We thank you for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.